Hey, welcome back. Today I'm going to be covering A Life at Noon by Talasbek Asemkulov for Kazakhstan on my Read Around the World project. And it was a nice enough day today. I thought I'd step outside and discuss this book, which was published in 2003. It is an autobiographical, semi-autobiographical novel where the main character is definitely the author himself, and but has a different name, and it's written in third person. His father is also a major character and is definitely based on the real life father of the author. That being said, I will say at the end of the video I'm going to talk about 3 more books that I'm working on that'll be coming up in future videos, so you can skip ahead at any point if you're just interested in that and kind of know as much about this book as you want to. But yeah, this was translated from Russian by Shelley Fairweather Vega, so I believe it was originally written in like the author's native language. I could be wrong about that, but it was translated from Russian. So overall impressions of the book, or what's kind of the central motif? Well, the back of the book would have you believe it's really focused around the art of the kui. The kui, I'm not sure quite how you pronounce it, K-U-Y. It's a sort of type of folk music, folk songs from Kazakhstan, or a tradition of that. And there is a specific instrument, the, let me get that, the dombira, and you can look up some Kazakh folk music on YouTube and really get an idea of what this stuff sounds like. It's pretty cool. I've never quite heard an instrument like it. It's very staccatoed type of stringed instrument, but yeah, the sound is very kind of palm muted, staccatoed a lot, but it can also ring out at very certain specific times, which is also, you know, a lot of the intricacies of playing this instrument and playing these folk songs are discussed in this book. To maybe some people will find it a little bit more than they wanted to know. So that's the interesting thing I'm gonna say about this one, is that it is, so I found the first section of the book to be average. Like, you know, I could move along with it. It wasn't really gripping me. I wasn't really getting attached to it. The second section was really difficult to get through because it's almost like, it's like 100 pages of just people telling each other stories and dialogue, and that's a really big problem for me. It's just a certain like literary thing that I really dislike and feel like there's almost always a better way to communicate information in a book than to have say, you know, one character just telling a story in dialogue to another. I just personally feel that that is never the best way to, well, never say never, but it's almost never the best way to communicate anything in a book and keep a reader's attention. This, to me, there's a few different things that I feel like. Well, first I'll say, before I go on to that, the third section was really incredible. The third part of this book, which is only like 80 pages, it just knocked me out. Like, it was so good, but I almost didn't get to it. I almost didn't get through that second section, and I almost did not finish the book. But that third and final section, which is just a sliver of the book, I think would make a wonderful standalone short story. I feel like this book could have been a third of the amount of pages, even half. I mean, I just feel it could have been seriously edited to be a much more impactful story for what it was giving at the end. That's a personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not, you know, when I started this Reading the World project a little over 1.5 years ago, I was at a point in life where I had really left literature behind. I had really, I had enjoyed reading a lot when I was younger. And this was just kind of a way for me to really get into something that I had always loved, and I'll talk more about that actually in future videos. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm not some, you know, critic that or the expert on what makes great literature, whatever. These are all personal opinions. I think that there's a lot of great stuff in this book that it just really, you have to be the kind of reader that's going to be patient and either really take your time with all of the stories that are being told and try to separate yourself from the fact that they're being told in dialogue, which I have a hard time doing. Like, so one way this book could have been better is just make it a short novella, edit it down, or second, just make it a collection of short stories that the father is telling throughout the book. Because I really feel like a lot of the most interesting parts of the book, like the traditional folklore, the musicianship of the folk songs, the kui, would have been much better served by focusing just on a few themes. But it really gets into like, so for me, like the weakest parts of the book were when it starts getting into stories about, you know, things that happened during the Bolshevik Revolution, and I'm not minimizing, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to minimize the fact that people went through extraordinary suffering in Kazakhstan. Like there was a horrible famine as a result of the Bolshevik takeover and collectivization. There was also some, according to this book, mass killings that went on. And I don't want to minimize any of that, but as a literary experience, as a book to be read, I feel like it would have been better served not focusing it didn't need to tell these long stories of the father's past. It could have maybe hinted at them in other ways or told them a lot more succinctly. So I don't want to be the person that goes over long, so I'm going to flip things around. I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I'm going to be reading next, and then I'm going to talk about what I really loved about the 3rd section of this book and why it was so great, but that's obviously very spoilery. So if you don't want those spoilers, then you can just, you know, I'll just show you what books I'm going to be reading next briefly. For the poetry stuff, I haven't forgotten about poetry. Ovid's Metamorphosis, or Metamorphoses, I don't know. But this is obviously a very important epic work of poetry, originally written in Latin and from the days of the Roman Empire, and it's obviously written in verse, so I'm going to do a longer video about my favorite parts about it and my thoughts as usual, just kind of reminiscing. I feel like the appeal of those kinds of videos are for people that have already read it or are interested in it and just kind of want to hear, you know, hear me talk as if you were talking to a friend about books, and hearing like a friend's thoughts who had also engaged with the work as much as you did or wanted to or want to in the future. So that's going to be my next major poetry video whenever I finish it. I don't know when it's going to be. I'm just kind of taking a chapter a day. Or less. So, The Baron in the Trees by Italo Calvino. This is going to be my next like repeat author on this channel. So this will be like the 5th or 6th that I've read a second book by an author. And Italo Calvino, while much like Clarice Lispector, while I didn't have the greatest first impression of him, I've really come to appreciate his work. And The Baron of the Trees is absolutely riveting. I can't wait to talk about it. I'm enjoying it so much right now. And I'm really like right in the middle of it. So that'll be coming soon, I believe, because I can barely stop reading it. And then for Reading the World, I'm going to be doing Cameroon, How Beautiful We Were. This has pretty good reviews on Goodreads and stuff like that, if you take any stock in that. It's modern literature or recently published books can be hit and miss, but this is pretty much the one that everyone reads for Cameroon. I hope I'm getting that right. But yeah, if I'm not, sorry. Pretty sure it's Cameroon though. So yeah, I'll be reading that and letting you know my thoughts. So back to what I loved about the 3rd section of Life at Noon. Yeah, so this book, I haven't started the spoilers yet, but I did want to mention 210 pages, but the way the text is laid out, you see how much text is on a page. This could easily have been a 400-page book if it or 300-page book maybe, if it was in a certain text. And that's part of why I feel like you could have taken this last section and made it an 80-page novella or a 100-page novella, and it would have been amazing. But we get the main character as I'm gonna have a real problem with the pronunciation, I'm sure. Azagari, who is in his last years of kind of I think their equivalent to high school or secondary school. He's 17 years old, and he's in class with all his classmates. And this is in all-out Soviet Union days, and we get some of that sort of cultural element. And so what really started to draw me in here was there's actually tension in a relationship between the main character Azagari and another character, and that's a girl he likes. So what sucked me in this whole book more than anything was this little like high school romance basically in Kazakhstan. And I just feel like, I don't know, this was just the most interesting relationship in the entire book to me. And then the dynamic between that relationship and that Azagari has with his father, and the musicianship, and this girl that he likes is also a musician of the Dumbaira, playing the quiz. So they all play the stringed instruments, the love interest, the boy and his father. So they're all connected by the instrument and the music, and each of course have a certain relationship with each other in this context where and also in this section, here's where the spoilers, so if you want to experience this book for yourself, it turns out that Azagari's father is not really his father, it's his grandfather. And in fact, the father of Azagari had died way earlier in this book, and it was who he thought was his uncle. Or was it his, it's who he thought was his brother-in-law. I can't remember. That's the other thing, is like when you read works like this, like I'm noticing this especially in sort of certain books that come from particular cultures, there's a lot more emphasis on kinship connections, and this is an anthropology connection that if you don't have the patience to try to understand the significance of kinships, different kinship concepts in different cultures, you're going to have a hard time with certain books like this one as well. But and it's hard even for me, who sometimes I am interested in those connections. But when it isn't, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I have to be already compelled by something else in the book, a certain relationship or a certain character, before I can really feel compelled to want to dig into further information that will help me understand the book. So I guess I'm a reader that does expect the book to cater a bit to me as a reader, instead of me having to do all the work. But anyway, that's just kind of a tangent. But yeah, so Azagari has this relationship with Gulshat, and his father is dying, has an illness, and is close to death. And the Gulshat and Azagari both have their moments where they play instruments for their class. It's just a really nice 80 pages, like a really beautiful little standalone short story. So I think I will probably come back to this book and page through and see if that final part can help me appreciate earlier parts of the book. There's also a really powerful meditation on death that I found actually to be really beautiful. So I'm just going to read this section out loud, obviously really spoilery. This is, I think, kind of the poetic height that this book reaches, even through translation. The meaning and the poetry of this section comes through for me. So let me get a drink first. A man is only a reed, the weakest thing in creation, but he is a reed who knows how to think and feel. It doesn't take all the strength in the world to destroy a reed. Just refuse it a drop of water and it withers. This is, of course, after the death of Azagari's grandfather, who all this time he thought was his father, but still is a person very, obviously he's raised him like a father, so let me skip ahead a bit. A person does not understand death until he sees the death of someone truly close to him, someone he loves. There is no meaning in death. He remembered a story his Ata had once told him. That story had never left his mind, apparently. The death of a child who had just opened the door to the world, and now his Ata had left this world. There is no meaning in death. Death doesn't care if you are 8 or 80, whether you've only just arrived in the world or have lived out the time allotted to you. When someone you love dies, someone you know well, someone who became part of your soul, something inside you dies as well. You grieve, you feel empty because you are a person, a fleeting creature. Death is the only thing a person cannot cheat. Everything else is subject to the human intellect. Only death remains beyond the power of man, blameless. There is no limit to human dreams and aspirations. If he could, man would reign over death as well. But death is in a mysterious realm on the other side of a boundary across which man cannot step. Man will never be able to cheat death. He can only die. He can never drink his fill of its secrets, so death is the only truth in the world, the only immaculate truth. When death breaks down the door to the familiar, ordinary world, life loses all meaning. Yes, there truly was no meaning in life. Death uncovers all truths and reveals the true place of everything. When you come face to face with death, the enormous ancient black earth slips from under your feet, and suddenly you realize that this death of a loved one is foretelling your own death. Because every death is the death of every one of us. Because every death is the death of us all. What did he feel when he stepped over the threshold of eternity? Who knows? But when he stepped onto that far edge, when the last drop of strength and hope were gone, without a doubt, the angel alighting on his shoulder, his father, without a doubt, his love, his suffering and grief, his caring had supported him. They had become the angel alighting on his shoulder. His father had been a good man, outwardly stern, yes, but caring. He crossed the river of life with his thoughts, and also with the troubles, the pains, and joys of other people. He accepted every sunrise as a gift from Tengri. To be a man, you must survive many things. Being a man is a first requirement for any form of art. His father was a man who knew his own worth. Someone who knows his worth. Someone who knows his worth can lift up another person, lift up all people. He loved his father, for many reasons, but most of all for the respect he had for his son's will and wishes. And I mean, you can kind of see, I guess when I read that with the sort of troubled romance that Azagari is having with this young woman, Gulshat, and everything going on, his emotions are heightened. He's a young man just about to really start his life. And thinking about all these things and facing the passing of his grandfather who raised him like a father, it was really affecting. I don't know, last night when I finished it or read it, and this is of course then finished the book, and it's not a book that leaves any sort of romantic or rosy view of the world. It's very raw and real and everything, and sometimes almost too real in how mundane and boring life can be. But I think even you can see from that passage that it feels like this book could do with a little bit of editing. It can be very repetitive and long paragraphs. Sometimes paragraphs just go on a really long time, which is not always a bad thing. And maybe in the original language, this is all very poetic and very beautiful. I don't know, I can't say about the translation. But yeah, so it's a book that had some, beautiful moments, but kind of flawed, in my opinion, some, not flawed, but just some challenges to coming into its world and really appreciating it fully, which I've already kind of discussed how I feel it could have been different, but that's my opinion on A Life at Noon by Talasbek, Asemkulov. Thank you for following the channel, and we'll see you next time with whichever one of those 3 books I showed you I finish first. So, thanks. Take care. So I don't really feel like doing the video again, but I realized I forgot to say that this is really slice of life to the extreme in Kazakhstan. So you really get life, a lot of the kinship and village life in the aul, or owl, which is the sort of village that the villages that the Kazakh people live in, and it's kind of this sort of transition culture between sort of the old steppe life, but it's still very much based in the use of horses and things like that, to the modernized Soviet Union life where everyone is going to school and things like that. So it is it has made me think that maybe, not all stories really need to be told in books, that sometimes they are more effective told out loud, as they are shown in the book, with people speaking in dialogue to each other. And sometimes, with the book being so focused on music, I spent so much of the book thinking, well, I'd rather just be hearing this rather than reading it. So there is kind of an element where I think maybe books or literature are not always the best ways to communicate certain experiences. So that's also something I am taking away from this work. Okay.